The horizon of the global automotive industry is currently glowing with a strange and unsettling light that most casual observers mistake for a standard technological sunset, but in reality, it is the dawn of a brutal and silent war that will determine who owns the roads of the next century and beyond. While the world has been distracted by shiny touchscreens and self-driving software, a far more dangerous game is being played beneath the surface of the Earth, where the very elements that power our future are becoming the ultimate weapons of geopolitical control. Elon Musk recently stepped onto a global stage and dropped a technological bombshell that sounded like a dry engineering update to the uninitiated, yet it sent massive shockwaves through the boardrooms of Toyota and BYD and every legacy automaker on the planet. When he spoke of a motor entirely free of rare earth metals, he was not just talking about a cheaper part but was effectively declaring independence from a global supply chain that has held the industry hostage for decades. The real question that we must ask today is not whether a motor can be made without these precious minerals, but rather what hidden architecture lies within this new invention that could turn the entire electric market upside down and leave the competition stranded in the dust of the past. Because the truth is that today the entire electric vehicle world relies on a handful of metals that are buried in limited locations and controlled by even fewer hands. If a single company breaks this chains of dependence, the game stops being about who has the fastest car or the best branding and starts being about who has the ultimate control over the future of movement itself. Whispers have already begun to turn into screams within the industrial corridors as experts wonder if this is just a new motor or the single greatest technological pivot since the transition from horses to internal combustion engines. You might think you know the story of Tesla, but to understand why they are betting their entire multi-billion-dollar empire on this invisible change, we have to go back to a time when the world laughed at the very idea of an electric car and saw it as nothing more than a toy for the wealthy or a failed experiment for the eccentric. In 2003, when Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning founded the company, the term EV was a punchline for a joke about slow golf cart-like vehicles that no sane person would ever drive for a long distance, and the internal combustion engine was considered an unbeatable king that would rule for another 1,000 years without challenge. When Elon Musk entered the picture in 2004, he was not just investing his wealth, he was investing in a vision that every major analyst on Wall Street called an absolute impossibility and a waste of venture capital. But Musk saw something that others ignored, which was the convergence of lithium-ion battery technology and high-performance power electronics that could finally liberate the automobile from the shackles of fossil fuels. The 2008 Roadster was the first real blow against the status quo, proving that electricity could scream from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in just 4 seconds, which was a performance level that only Ferraris and Lamborghinis could achieve at the time. But that success was built on the razor edge of a blade, because by the end of that year Tesla was a dying animal bleeding cash at an incredible rate and facing a wall of skepticism from investors who were fleeing the scene as the global economy collapsed during the Great Recession, and it seemed that the dream of the electric car was about to be buried in the graveyard of failed startups. Musk threw his entire personal fortune, including the last of the money from his PayPal exit, into the fire in an act that many called pure insanity and social suicide. But that madness birthed the Model S in 2012, which changed the narrative forever, from quirky experiments to undeniable luxury and high-performance engineering that could outperform the best German sedans while providing a range that made daily driving a reality for the first time in history. From the Model X with its futuristic Falcon wing doors to the mass-market explosion of the Model 3 and the global dominance of the Model Y, Tesla did not just sell cars, they sold a new way of existing in a digital world where the car is a mobile computer that receives updates over the air and improves with age. They scaled from selling 50,000 cars in 2015 to nearly 2 million in 2023, turning a laughingstock into a global titan that now dictates the pace of the entire industry and has forced giants like Volkswagen and General Motors to abandon their gasoline dreams and pivot toward an uncertain electric future. But as they climbed to the top, they realized they were standing on a foundation of sand, because every single one of those millions of cars was built using materials they did not fully control, and the supply of neodymium and dysprosium became a bottleneck that threatened to cap their growth just as they were reaching for the stars. And this is the hidden trap of the electric era, a dependency that makes the entire industry look like a giant with feet of clay. And as we move forward into the heart of this mystery, you will see how one specific engineering choice is about to ignite a fire that will either forge a new future or burn the old guard to the ground, leaving only those who can innovate without limits standing in the end of this high-stakes race for survival and dominance in a world that is moving faster than anyone ever anticipated. The struggle for Tesla was never just about the cars themselves, but about the fundamental physics of how we generate power and movement. And now that the stakes have reached a breaking point, the move toward a rare earth-free motor is the final piece of a puzzle that Musk has been building for over 20 years. And if he succeeds, the world will never look at an electric motor the same way again, as the old dependencies crumble and a new era of absolute manufacturing freedom begins to take shape right before our eyes in a way that will change everything we know about the cost and the scale of transportation forever. And this is only the beginning of a much deeper transformation that will reach every corner of the globe, from the busiest cities to the most remote regions where the dream of affordable and sustainable travel has been out of reach until now, because the barriers are finally coming down and the invisible revolution is starting to move at a speed that no one can stop, even the most powerful governments and oil companies who have tried to slow down this transition for decades find themselves powerless against the raw force of technological innovation that is now reaching its final and most disruptive stage, as the motor becomes the ultimate battleground for the future of the planet, and the history of transportation is rewritten in real time before our very eyes as we witness the birth of a new industrial age that will define the lives of our children and grandchildren in ways that we are only beginning to understand today through the lens of this remarkable and terrifying journey that started in a small garage and ended up changing the world forever through the sheer force of will and the relentless pursuit of an idea that was once considered a fantasy, but has now become the inevitable destiny of the entire human race as we move toward the stars and beyond in our quest for a cleaner and more efficient way to live and move on this pale blue that we call home. The shiny surface of the electric vehicle revolution hides a dark and dusty secret that most manufacturers would prefer you never look at too closely, because while we celebrate the end of gasoline and the death of the internal combustion engine, we have unknowingly traded one dangerous addiction for another, moving from a desperate dependence on foreign oil to a far more localized and strategic reliance on rare earth metals such as neodymium and dysprosium and praseodymium, which are the hidden heartbeats of almost every high-performance electric car on the road today. These elements are the invisible foundations of the modern world, because they are used to create the permanent magnets that make modern motors so incredibly efficient and compact, allowing for that neck-snapping acceleration and smooth torque that has become the hallmark of the electric age. But these magnets come with a price tag that is not just measured in dollars or cents. Instead, it is measured in the fragile stability of a global supply chain where the vast majority of the world's mining and processing capacity is concentrated in the hands of a single nation, China, which currently controls over 90% of the refined rare earth supply chain, creating a terrifying bottleneck that keeps every major automaker from Detroit to Tokyo in a state of constant anxiety. This is the true weakness of the green revolution, a reality where the cost of your future car is dictated not by internal innovation or engineering brilliance, but by the volatile politics and export licenses of a geopolitical rival that understands exactly how much leverage it holds over the Western industrial base. And as the world moves toward 2026, this pressure is only increasing, with Beijing implementing stricter export controls and licensing mechanisms that can effectively throttle the supply of these essential minerals at any given moment, leaving companies like Tesla and Ford and Mercedes-Benz wondering if their production lines will grind to a halt because of a political shift half a world away. The environmental cost is equally staggering, because extracting these metals is a brutal and toxic process that involves crushing thousands of tons of rock and using massive amounts of acid and chemicals to separate the rare elements, resulting in radioactive wastewater and acidified soil that leaves permanent scars on the landscape where they are mined. And yet, for years, the industry has accepted this devil's bargain because there was simply no better way to build a high-performance motor that could fit inside a consumer vehicle without adding hundreds of pounds of weight. But now the stakes have changed and the strategic risk has become too great to ignore, as the United States and the European Union rush to find domestic alternatives or build their own processing plants, only to realize that they are decades behind in the race for mineral supremacy. This is why the announcement of a rare earth-free motor is not just a technical update, but a desperate escape attempt from a trap that has been closing for 10 years. And if Tesla can successfully transition to a permanent magnet motor that uses abundant materials like ferrite or other alloys that are chemically stable and easy to source from anywhere in the world, they will have effectively neutralized one of the greatest threats to their long-term survival. But the challenge of using these alternative materials is that they traditionally possess much weaker magnetic strength, which means the motor must be larger or the engineering must be significantly more complex to achieve the same level of performance and efficiency that consumers have come to expect. This is the engineering mountain that the rest of the industry is still staring at from the base, while Tesla is already making its move to the summit. And as we look closer at the shifting manufacturing landscape, it becomes clear that the companies who can break their dependence on rare earth metals will be the only ones capable of scaling their production to the millions of units required to truly replace the gasoline car, while those who stay tied to the old supply chains will find themselves increasingly vulnerable to price spikes and shortages that could make their vehicles too expensive for the average buyer. And this geopolitical chessboard is where the real war for EV dominance is being fought today, far away from the showrooms and the marketing campaigns, because the winner will not just be the one with the best software or the fastest charging battery, but the one who controls the source of their own strength and can build a future that is truly independent and sustainable for everyone, regardless of the political climate or the scarcity of the Earth's most hidden treasures. And we must understand that this is not just about a single component, but about the very sovereignty of industrial nations who have realized that energy independence in the 21st century means more than just drilling for oil. It means mastering the complex chemistry and physics of the materials that will drive the global economy into a new era of clean energy. And as the tension between global powers continues to rise, the race to eliminate rare earth metals from the electric motor will be seen as one of the most important technological shifts in human history, because it represents the final break from the resource-driven conflicts of the past and the beginning of a future where human ingenuity is the only fuel we need to move forward. And this shift will redefine everything from the cost of logistics to the price of a daily commute, making the dream of a truly global and accessible electric transport system a reality for the billions of people who are still waiting for their chance to join the revolution and leave the age of fossil fuels behind forever, as we witness the birth of a new and truly independent industrial age that will shape the destiny of the entire human race for generations to come, in a world that is finally learning how to thrive without destroying itself or relying on the fragile whims of a limited and dangerous supply chain that has held us back for far too long. When we reach this critical point in the story of the electric vehicle, the real mystery begins to unfold, because a motor without rare earth magnets is not just a simplified version of what we have today, but a fundamental reimagining of how electricity is converted into motion and force. The traditional way of thinking dictates that you must have permanent magnets to create a constant magnetic field that allows the motor to spin, but what Elon Musk and his team of radical engineers are doing is attempting to replace physical matter with pure digital intelligence and high-frequency switching. And this is where the transition from hardware to software supremacy becomes a reality that could disrupt every factory on Earth. Instead of relying on the natural magnetic pull of neodymium, these new generation motors are moving toward a concept of dynamic electromagnetic field generation, where the magnetic flux is not a static property of the metal, but a living, breathing force that is created and destroyed thousands of times every second through the precise application of electrical current. And this is only possible because of the massive leap in power electronics and silicon carbide inverters that Tesla has pioneered over the last few years, allowing them to manage energy with a level of precision that was scientifically impossible just a decade ago. The hidden technology behind this shift involves a complex architecture known as a synchronous reluctance motor, or perhaps a highly advanced version of an induction system, where the rotor is designed with intricate geometric cutouts that guide the magnetic field lines in a way that generates maximum torque with minimum heat. And this is the holy grail of EV engineering, because heat is the ultimate enemy of efficiency and range in any electric system. And by removing the permanent magnets, you are essentially removing the materials that are most sensitive to high temperatures, allowing the motor to run harder and faster for longer periods of time without the risk of demagnetization or performance degradation. But the real genius lies in the software algorithms that act as the brain of this new machine, because without permanent magnets, the motor is inherently less stable and requires a constant stream of data to tell it exactly how much power to send to each coil at every microsecond of the rotation. And this requires a level of computational power that most legacy car companies simply do not have integrated into their drive units. This is why Tesla is often described as a software company on wheels rather than a traditional car manufacturer, because they are using code to solve problems that others are trying to solve with expensive and rare physical materials. And as the software learns and optimizes the way the magnetic field is generated, it can actually improve the car's efficiency through over-the-air updates, meaning your motor could actually become more powerful or more efficient while the car is sitting in your driveway overnight. And this level of flexibility is what creates the energy efficiency trade-off mystery, because while a magnet-free motor should theoretically be less efficient, the sheer intelligence of the control system allows it to narrow that gap until it becomes indistinguishable from the most advanced permanent magnet motors in the world today. And this shift also allows for a massive reduction in the complexity of the manufacturing process, because you no longer have to deal with the dangerous and difficult task of handling massive high-strength magnets during the assembly phase, which can be a nightmare for robotic systems and human workers alike. And by simplifying the physical build of the motor while increasing the complexity of the code, Tesla is creating a massive moat that competitors will find nearly impossible to cross, because while you can eventually source or copy a piece of hardware, you cannot easily replicate millions of lines of proprietary code that have been trained on billions of Miles of real-world driving data, and this is the hidden advantage that will allow the next generation of electric vehicles to be lighter, faster, and more reliable than anything we have seen before as we move toward a future where the mechanical parts of the car become secondary to the invisible intelligence that guides them, and the transition to a rare earth-free future becomes not just an environmental necessity but a strategic masterstroke that secures the dominance of those who can master the digital ghost within the machine. And as this technology matures, it will pave the way for a new era of global production where the limits of the Earth's resources no longer dictate the limits of human mobility, and the dream of a truly sustainable and independent transport system moves one step closer to reality through the marriage of advanced physics and revolutionary software that is redefining the very essence of what it means to drive in the 21st century and beyond. As the global market prepares for the greatest shift in industrial history, where every single kilowatt of energy is harvested and managed with robotic precision to ensure that no drop of electricity is wasted in our quest for a cleaner and more efficient world for everyone everywhere, regardless of their economic status or geographic location, because the code is universal and the light of innovation is finally beginning to shine on a path that leads away from the scarcity of the past and toward a future of absolute abundance and freedom for all of humanity to move and explore without boundaries. The final chapter of this technological saga is not being written in the design studios of California or the high-tech labs of Texas, but in the brutal and unforgiving reality of the global marketplace, where the survival of the fittest is determined by the ability to scale and dominate the mass market at prices that were previously thought to be impossible for any electric vehicle to achieve. If the rare earth-free motor truly succeeds in its mission to liberate the industry from the shackles of expensive and volatile minerals, its impact will not be limited to just one company but will create a massive and unstoppable domino effect that could force every legacy automaker from Toyota and Volkswagen to bid and Ford to completely abandon their current multi-billion-dollar strategies and rethink their entire existence as the industry enters a period of unprecedented price competition and strategic reordering. For many years, the biggest players in the automotive game have built their empires on the assumption that rare earth magnets were an essential and unchangeable part of the electric vehicle architecture, and they have invested incredible amounts of money and human capital into supply chains and manufacturing setups that are now at high risk of becoming obsolete overnight. Imagine the pressure on a company like BID, which has risen to become a global titan by controlling its own battery production, only to find that the next battlefield is not the battery chemistry but the motor system itself, where Tesla might soon have a massive cost advantage that allows them to slash prices to levels that their competitors cannot match without losing money on every car they sell. This is the beginning of a global price war that could bleed the old guard dry, while Tesla leverages its software supremacy to maintain margins even as the hardware becomes cheaper and more accessible. And this transition is what finally paves the way for the ultimate dream of the modern automotive world, which is the $20,000 electric vehicle that does not compromise on performance or range or safety or style. For far too long, the electric car has been a luxury reserved for the wealthy in developed nations or a niche product for early adopters, but by removing the rare earth tax and simplifying the mechanical core of the vehicle, Musk and the innovators who follow him are opening the door to a new era of truly global mobility, where a reliable and high-tech EV is within the financial reach of the average person in every corner of the planet, from the emerging markets of South Asia and Africa to the growing middle class of Latin America and Eastern Europe. This is not just about selling more cars to increase a stock price, but about a fundamental shift in how human civilization operates, because when the cost of owning and operating an electric vehicle drops significantly below the cost of maintaining a gasoline car, the transition becomes mathematically inevitable and environmentally unstoppable, accelerating the electrification of massive taxi fleets and delivery networks and public transport systems at a speed that will catch the world by surprise and reshape the urban landscape of every major city on Earth, while reducing the noise and pollution that have plagued our lives since the dawn of the industrial age. And as we look toward the end of this decade and the beginning of the next, the companies that survive will be the ones who realized early on that the true power was never in the physical magnets themselves, but in the ability to innovate and adapt. When the Earth's resources became a cage or a weapon of geopolitical leverage, the rare earth-free motor is the final and definitive declaration of independence for the electric age, a sign that the greatest changes are often the ones we cannot see from the outside but can feel in the performance and the cost of the products we use every day. And as this new direction becomes the industry standard and the old permanent magnet systems are phased out like the steam engines of the past, the balance of power will shift permanently away from those who control the minds and toward those who control the intelligence and the manufacturing processes that will define the next century of human progress. Stay tuned, because the future of the Road is being rewritten right now in ways that will change your life and the lives of billions of people forever through the sheer power of human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of a world that is no longer bound by the limits of what we can dig out of the ground but by the limits of what we can imagine and build together in our quest for a cleaner and more prosperous future for all of humanity as the Invisible Revolution reaches its peak and the era of truly affordable electric transport begins its global conquest without any boundaries or limitations holding it back from achieving its full potential in a world that is finally ready to embrace the change and move forward into the light of a new and better age for everyone.